punks, hippies, and goth, and many more groups are known as subcultures. So what is the term subculture? According to Chris Jenks, he explains subculture is a precise group of individuals within culture and traditions that differentiates itself from the parent culture from which it belongs. However, it does often still retain typical traits. It allows like-minded people who feel neglected to experience their own sense of identity. Basically, each group established their own world. Now that we know what is a subculture, this leads to our main questions. What are the signs that signify subculture? To answer this, we will go through main key terms. Firstly, style, and secondly, behavior, as both signify subculture. Starting off with the points style. Style is constructed into clothes, music, and many other elements that help define subculture individually and uniquely. Distinctive blends of fashion and music became a process of feature. The cultural landscape analysis into these phenomena has transversed the social sciences, humanities, subcultures, genre, and social modification, assemble necessary theoretical interventions, empirical studies from the wealthy knowledge domain field. In Heritage book, The Meaning of Style, this book focuses on British post-war youth subcultures style. Some of the subcultures he focused on are teddy boys, who are originally known as Coach boys. It is a British subculture of working class teenagers that started during the 1950s in London. They were known as rebellious, but we'll come back to this point later, as their fashion style is inspired by dandies during the Edwardian period, drab jackets, drain-pipe trousers, and skinny ties. Their hairstyle was inspired by Elvis Presley. It has been widely stated that in Britain they were not only associated with rock and roll, but also with jazz and skiffle. When early rock and roll entered America's scene with the semblance of Jerry Lee Lewis, Jenny Vincent, Elvis, and Buddy Holly, the Teds found their actual sound. Punk subculture began in the 1970s, as they have changed everything. This subculture allowed generations to be more open and express themselves through artistically ripped shirts, dyed hair, and from cosmetics to tattoos. The first bands that displayed punk music came from the origins of southeastern Michigan. Two most famous bands are MC5 and the Stooges. MC5 were widely recognized in the 1960s for their politically live performance. The Stooges and their charismatic lead singer Iggy Pop had been even more influential than MC5. The Ramones were also an important band when it comes to the development of punk style. Creating brief, fast, minimalist songs, the Ramones delivered rock songs right down to its maximum essential essence. Their songs set the template both musically and stylistically for the punk rock that would come later. A great movie that recalls in the 1980s punk movement is the American hardcore film that was released in 2006. This movie is a documentary inspired by Stephen Blush's book, American Hardcore, A Tribal History, where the filmmaker Paul Rashmans included in his movie the history of the underground hardcore punk, years from 1979 to 1868. This brings us to our second key term, behavior. Subcultures, most of the time they are labeled as rebellious. Most of subcultures' behavior presents their anger towards society that resulted in how the society have not accepted them. According to Michael Ryan, the author of the book Culture Studies, he explains that our identity is limited within the culture we live in through our actions, what is good and what is bad. Majority of individuals develop a new identity and feel more related to other subcultures. Therefore, their behavior reflects their anger and how they felt neglected by society. They act rebellious and break the rules. Still, most of them just don't mind society and just follow simply the rules. A popular subculture that is known for having rebellious behavior are the skinheads. Skinheads started in London 1960s. They rejected the immature culture movement and exploited its attribute of peace and love, and deliberately cultivated aspects of fashion and culture that were furthest off from it. Although the primary skinheads were non-political, several of them were before long drawn into extreme nationalists, especially anti-immigrants. Some skinheads were recruited as stormtroopers for neo-Nazi organizations, and therefore the movement became progressively politicized. Skinhead gangs typically attacked immigrants, notably Turks and Asians in European countries and Indians and Pakistanis in Britain. A classic of such gang was presented in the Australian film Romper Stomper in 1992, starring Russell Crowe, played as Handu, a member of a gang of racist skinheads attacking the growing quantity of Asian immigrants with violence. Handu and his partner Davy were leading a bunch of brutal gangs. They have been satisfied that what they had been doing was the noble work of saving Australia. Going back to Teddy Boys, their actions to society were labeled as trouble. Usually they gather in the dance halls, hide in a bar, hang around as a group that draws society's attention. Their behavior was frightening: razor attacks, gang fighting, and even robbery actions. These actions reflected their willingness to have more freedom and their desire for an open new age. Taking for example, when Bill Haley movie Rock Around the Clock arrived in the UK in 1956, angry Teds erupted, cinema seats were slashed, fireworks and bottles were thrown, windows smashed, and police battled with teenagers. Nothing of the kind had ever been seen before. It triggered Britain to wake up in shock to the existence of the teenager, kicking off a more panic that swept through the media. In conclusion, we are surrounded by hundreds of different subcultures around us, and each culture have its own meaning and values, and each one is divided into stylistically which they present themselves to the world by certain cloth code, and the music, and also behavior, and that's where they express their true emotions to society and people. That's it for today's video, and thank you for watching.